Because if all we do is operate around day to day thinking about me and me only, you're losing so much potential and fulfillment of what you're actually extracting from your life, right? What is up? Welcome to Pursuit of Balance, episode 29. We're going to talk about the 6 human needs and how these are impacting your life and decisions that you make. I've been watching a lot of Tony Robbins lately. I don't know if he's like back on like this podcasting run or talking about his new event that's coming up at the end of January or whatever it is. By the time you guys are hearing this, it's probably getting shot right now. But whatever, Tony Robbins has always been something that I've had like just a general admiration for. I think like financially what he's accomplished. I love this, I've always said that like if I can go any other route in life outside of being a trainer, I'd probably be doing lifestyle coaching. I don't know what that means. I feel like I already kind of say that. I'm like, I'm not a trainer. I'm just a lifestyle coach, which is, I think is really like his thing is like he really just wants to end suffering. He wants to see people happy. And like he's just a genuine good dude. Like me and my wife are been watching a lot of podcasts, like obviously, well, I always do, but I watch them now like at home. I'll just basically airplay it on my TV. My wife was sitting there and she goes, I don't know why so many people like dislike Tony Robbins. And I was like, oh, I never heard that. Like, who said that? She goes, oh, there was like a lot of stuff going around about like, I don't know what it was for, but she's like, he's just a good dude, And I'm like, he is, isn't he? Whatever. So he was talking about one of these episodes, I think it was on Diary of CEO, that podcast. And he was talking about like these 6 human needs, right? That like we all live. And the guy was asking a lot of questions, I think probably a little bit more business oriented. But like also like why do certain people make certain decisions? And I think a lot of these like podcasts that I follow, either in the business space or lifestyle space, or like I've always just been fascinated with like human psychology and seeing people better off. And like obviously training in the fitness industry has always been tied into that. And like as I get older, I start to think a little bit more of some of like the financial planning stuff with just my team in general. So whatever, I want to go through these because I think this is like basically like all human behaviors are driven by needs, not by logic, right? Was the thing that I wrote at the top of my paper. And these 6 needs are kind of our, in a sense, like our guiding lights, right? And that being said, I want you guys to remember that all 6 of these needs they're all needs, right? But we allocate more unconsciously towards certain needs, right? And like this is kind of like the little drill that I would probably give you guys to kind of think about as I'm going through these is like which ones are your top priorities now by what you do, right? Not by what you say, right? And that's going to be something different that we'll talk about in a second. But by like your actions that you live by, like there's going to be certain needs that are going to get exposed, right? So the first one that I have written down is number 1 is certainty. The need for safety, stability, and predictability, right? So comfort, routine, security. I would say for most people unconsciously, this tends to be such a big one, right? Like last week's episode, I was talking a little bit about like the episode Die with Zero and financial planning and retirement planning for some of us. And, one of the things that I think is interesting when you think about most of those things is like this need for security and certainty, right? And, I was telling this to Cisco and Glenn, and we're talking about like the manager meeting of like, okay, like when we can build these things out, like what is most important for the team? And it's funny because like for me, certainty is actually wasn't really high on the list. Like I think we all have them, but like as far as like what was a priority for me, it's like I've never, and I think this was like with business and like just life, an example, like I don't know. I almost got like complacent with the comfort, right? Or the certainty, right? Which kind of leads you to number 2, right? And the second one is variety, which is basically uncertainty. It's the exact opposite, right? The need for change, novelty, challenge, excitement, adventure. So this would be examples of like traveling. I wrote down new goals, creative projects. So when I think about just those 2 right off the top of the head, like for me, it's like variety, I would say is probably more important for me as far as the need that drives me in life. Than it is to have certainty, right? But for most people, I think just from like the clients or even team or like just people I'm surrounded by, I think a lot of times comfort or certainty is probably more important, right? And it's not, and none of these things are just say, hey, this is good versus bad, right? I just think just like, okay, it's like, why is certain people driven towards this versus not, right? And that's something I think for me, it's like just trying to always study human behavior of like, okay, my goal in life or my purpose, my mission, my job, to see people better off, right? And like see people happier, get people to move the right direction in life. And I think like certainty is something that I think can sometimes be, even though it's a blessing in so many ways, it can sometimes be a trap, right? Because like that's the thing that's just going to get you stuck in these patterns, right? And stuck in these habits of like maybe that are preventing you from moving the goalpost forward, right? Number three, this is a huge one, I think, for so many people, is significance, right? So the need to feel important, valued, or unique. So recognition, achievement, status, titles, accolades, the need for winning, the ego-driven stuff. I don't care who you are. I think to a degree, significance is always going to be there. Something Tony Robbins was saying is like sometimes people will chase significance for like what could be viewed as good ways to do it, and some people do it with bad ways. And he was kind of using examples like some people that use violence, right? Like some of these, like even when you like study, I even think the psychology of like when you see these documentaries and like serial killers and random shit like that, I'm like, the fuck gets a person to that level, and Tony Robbins kind of brought it up, which I thought was an interesting take, was like, hey, like to a degree, that is a desire for significance, right? Maybe the way that they were raised and like maybe not having a parents or a good relationship with their family, or being disregarded or being picked on or bullied, or being kind of left behind, as a child, like changed them to be this person later in life for a negative reason. But the need for the human behavior desire was this desire to be significant, this desire to be important, this desire to be talked about. And I think no matter who you are, I think significance is always going to be something that like some people are like really, really crave it, need it. For me, I will say that's like just thinking about these things, even as I was writing them down last night, I was like, I think for sure, like significance was always important to me. Like I think like just showing, I remember just even being a kid, like, you want to show your friends, hey, like, what, watch this trick, or watch this. You're like, I'm going to show you what I can do. And like, even for work, I've always had, one of the people I admire the most as far as athletes goes was always Michael Jordan. And I think like Michael Jordan, one of the things that I connected to the most as far as personality trait, like he really had to create a frame in his head to literally create almost enemies with his competition. Like he needed this desire to just do something deeper that like fueled him, right? And I always thought, like, for me, it was like I always had that when I was younger, where I was like, I needed to show people that I was capable of doing so. And it was almost to show my significance that I was capable of doing so, that I was, and like that need for winning. And like I was such a sore loser. I don't even know if I would say such. I might be still a sore loser to a degree. It's gotten better. But I was such a terrible sore loser when I was a kid. Like I needed to win. And that's such an ego thing, right? And I think that's obviously related to a lot of the significance aspect of it. Number four is loving connection. So obviously the need for belonging, closeness, emotional intimacy. I think a lot of times this is a little bit of an upbringing thing. For me, it's like I didn't really grow up with a family that like said I love you and was physically kind of connect. I mean, what I'm trying to say, like we didn't barely hugs. We didn't say I loved you. It was just kind of just like and it wasn't abnormal to me. It wasn't wrong. And I don't even view it now looking back on it as like, oh, I wish my parents did this. And then when I started dating my wife, I was like, wow, like this family says I love you. They're so like physical and hug. It's just like, it was like a different level of like family dynamic for me. And as I've gotten older, I've really, really learned to just like appreciate it, right? And now it's like I'm saying like, oh, I love you to my friends. Like, it's just like the connection as I got older is like become more and more important, which is also an interesting thing. I think with like these like human behaviors and needs that we have, is like the things that maybe were more important to us later in life as we mature and grow and kind of figure out what we kind of want to get out of it. You start to see that like some of these behaviors will change. So number four is loving connection. So number five is growth, the need for continuous improvement and learning. Physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. I think about growth on all aspects of life. You guys hear me say this all the time. That is like, for me, when I talk about working with motivation, a lot of times people in a lot of spaces, not even just the fitness space, say like, oh, motivation's bullshit. And I'm like, yes and no, right? Like for me, it's like motivation is bullshit if you're relying on it. But motivation is also a resource that I like to leverage if I have, right? Meaning it's like, if I can get you to become more motivated, I make my job and your experience way better, right? Because you're enjoying it. You're motivated towards it. And it's like, we all have experienced this in life. It's like when you're doing something that you're motivated by, it is just like, actually Tony Robbins talks about this. He talks about push energy and pull energy. A lot of times push energy is by force, right? Like I'm doing this through anger or through show my significance, like you said, to just get my way through somewhere or to somewhere with force versus pull energy, which is like this concept I think of like this idea of attracting versus chasing, right? Like attraction is just really genuinely being the person you are to your core and not having any ego or attachment outside of it. And then you attract the things that you're trying to chase, right? And it's funny for, like how one of the things I was watching last week, I think he was interviewing Alex Hormozy, so another business guy that, I'm sure you guys hear me mention all the time, but he's a big business guy, finance guy. And he was talking to this is actually like the first like podcast. I was like, man, interesting. Never seen him kind of be in this element. And Tony Robbins was basically like, hey, like it's very clear that I can see that you just have that push energy, right? Like there's an emotional disconnect of like fulfillment from what I'm seeing. And Alex was like, yeah. He's like, honestly, that's what I kind of feel like I'm missing in life. He's like, I work because I have to. And he said this thing, Alex used to say, I used to say to myself, like, fuck happiness, right? Like, why would I chase happiness? And Tony Robbins is just like, well, how about we can reframe this like fuck suffering? Like, why are we choosing to intentionally do that, right? So coming back to this motivation thing, it's like growth is basically the parallel to our motivation, right? Like when we start to achieve growth in life or we start to grow in life, right? That's a derivative of us having some level of motivation because psychologically as a need for us is like when we start to see growth, oh, our work is starting to get better. My body is starting to get stronger. I'm starting to get leaner. I'm starting to make more money. I'm starting to connect with my wife or my friends more, whatever it might be. There's growth, right? And when that growth starts to happen, it compounds, right? And when it starts to compound, it's like, oh, I'm motivated, right? And like, so that's where I always like to have that like argument on the other side. Like, I don't think motivation's bullshit. I think motivation is something that we should just learn to leverage. And that's by basically just creating the right circumstances to be able to do so, right? And then number 6, last one is contribution, right? So the need to give beyond yourself, service, impact, meaning. This could be examples of obviously from a work perspective, coaching, mentoring, charity, leadership. I talked about this, I think 2 weeks ago with a little bit of like, I don't know what I named the title of the episode, but it was the one where I was talking about like spirituality and what we can kind of learn from religions and like that aspect of like, how does it impact our health? And, something I talked about a lot in that episode that's kind of just really have stuck with me for the last 2-3 weeks was just like this idea for service, of being of service. Because if all we do is operate around day to day, thinking about me and me only, you're losing so much potential and fulfillment of what you're actually extracting from your life, right? And to be honest with you, and actually, I think once again, maybe I should just call this Tony Robbins podcast. Like he says that, and I agreed with it. I was like, it's not hard to fulfill our needs. Like it might be hard for some people to hear because I think there are so many people that are struggling on certain dynamics, right? Their physical health is not there, their financial health, their relationships or whatever. Like there's an aspect of health, and like that for me is like one of the big things why I like to do this is like hopefully share for those people maybe that might be in that circumstance. But like there's an aspect of like that once you understand the skills or the science of achievement, the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment, the science of achievement is a science. Like, so it's understanding the mechanisms, the systems, the skills. Like once you can learn to master that, and this is why I talk about so much that I think the best investment that we have in life is ourselves. Like you need to spend money on yourself. You need to do things like you need to continually read. You need to be listening to books. You need to go to podcasts. You need to do workshops. You need to do courses. Like you need to do things that just intellectually move you forward, spiritually move you forward, because that is going to give you so much more capacity to do so much more. And what I mean by that is, the first things first is you need to be able to fill your cup. You need to be able to do your own thing. So it's like being of service when you don't have the capacity to even serve is pointless, right? So I think like I always say like, yes, we need to take care of our own shit first. So, but once you master that, I think about this a lot with like the retirement side of me of like, my needs are pretty low. Like when I think about like, okay, what am I chasing as far as like financial goals, or what am I even setting for me as a target? And then I like to ask myself is like, why? Like, why am I making that a target for myself? Like, why is this a financial target for me? Or why is this a work target, whatever it might be? And I think really it comes back to growth, more importantly. But really it's just like I think it's contribution. I think it's for me, it's just like the idea that like I can be of service to other people is really what makes me happy because like the need for me doing it for me to extract something from it is not monetary as much as it is fulfillment. Like for me, it's like if I can get more joy and fulfillment out of my life, that's the most important thing, right? Because like I argue this all the time. And like one of the things that makes me the most sad to see people do, and so many people do it, is the fact that people stay in a job they dislike or complain about, or stay in a relationship that they don't like, or both. Certain things are harder than others to get out of. I understand that. But like the idea of consciously choosing pain and suffering as a route based off comfort, right? So when you think about that example, I've already given you examples like, okay, what is the idea of like why someone would stay in a job they dislike or a relationship they dislike? Maybe not even dislike, maybe just know that it's not right. I will look at that as a desire for certainty, comfort, something that we know works, security or know is there. And then number two would be the love and connection, right? Like there is a connection piece. There is love. Like I have somebody at least, even if it's not the right person. But for me, it's like I look at that as like you're choosing to elect for suffering. You're choosing to elect for pain. You're choosing to not maximize the quality of your life as far as your happiness goes, right? And it's like I know that the way that I can make my wife the happiest is by me being the happiest, right? Because like I can't just keep doing things for other people if I choose to ignore what I need to do for my needs. But once I understand what my needs are, and that's where I think like that, like why I use this topic today as an episode is like, these needs are all human needs, like I said. What's most important for you to get the most fulfillment, right? Something I wrote down at the bottom is like, the survival needs are certainty and variety, right? A combination of both of those, right? Psychological needs are going to be significance and love and connection, right? And then the spiritual needs are going to be growth and contribution, right? I think like if I were to look at 2 out of 6 as far as like things that I would like to work towards or continually keep working towards, it would be I honestly think it would be probably love and connection number 1 for me. Like I think like the idea of I don't know, I never really made love and connection something that was like an important part for me. I think you take it for granted when you have like, I have a healthy relationship with my family, my brothers, my parents, nothing, no complaints. But I never really looked at it as something that's like, oh, it's a need. Like I grew up in a very unconditional family, right? Like meaning like I can talk to my friends or my parents or my brothers, not see them for 3 months, 6 months, a year sometimes. Well, not that long, but, and like we can pick up where we left off. And my wife is giving me the other side of it where I've realized that like having conditional love is not necessarily a bad thing. I used to look at that as like, why should there be conditions in place? But at the end of the day, like I think there is conditions to everything. Like unconditional would become conditional if I was mistreated, right? Like if anybody that I was having unconditional relationship with, if I started to become screwed over by that person or treated badly, it would become conditional. So I think like I've opened my eyes like that there is condition to it. But I would say for me, like number 1, I would look at like love and connection, like just not only what I receive, but also what I give. And then number 2, which I think is part of the giving statement, is the contribution. I think like the older I get, the more I care about, like my wife and I were talking about this with, I think it was some commercial. But like, like something we would like to get into is like charity or even anything, right? And like one thing that I've always heard this is so true is sometimes we wait to make enough money to then start. And I'm not saying just give charity for money of like, here's a check for this. Sometimes it's just even investing time, right? Like I think about this a lot during like Thanksgiving. I'm like, man, sometimes it'd be cool to go like help out people in need on the holidays instead. Like the people that don't have anything. Like the thing I think still today that makes me the most emotional. Hannah actually asked me that here like 2-3 weeks ago. She's like, what do you cry about? Do you cry about anything? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, I cry about not a lot of things, but I cry about things. And she's like, well, what? And I was like, the number 1 thing for me that makes me the most sad is like seeing someone that's disabled or special needs or somebody that like it was born with circumstances that they couldn't change. And I don't even want to say it's a disadvantage, right? Because I want to be careful with how I'm saying this. But like for me, it's like there's a part of me that's like it makes me sad, but it makes me sad in like in a happy way that I'm like, okay, cool. Like Corey has a heart. And then there's a part of me that immediately changes my mindset to like, this is what pisses me off or drives me, however I want to frame this, on the people that don't have that excuse or don't have a limitation anyways, that are choosing to suffer or complain about things, right? So it's always like an interesting thing. But like for me, it was like I just want to do things to help other people, right? So and like what I would like to get away from is like, I think significance, even though it was such a big driver for me, like significance for me is like I don't know. It's hard to say it, like, 'cause I mean, like, really, I'm like evaluating myself as I'm trying to speak to you guys about this. But like, significance was like a big driver for me in life. Like, it was important for me to be like to take care of my own and make enough money. And I was always like, I wanted to win at everything I did. Like, it doesn't matter if it was sports or if it was business or whatever it was. Like, I always wanted to be the best, and it was like a lot of ego driving that, right? And then it was push energy, right? Like out of those two examples I gave you. I would like, as I've gotten older, I would like to say that it's definitely become less of a priority for me. And I would like that to continually become less of a priority, right? Because it's like all these things are needs, but what is the thing that's pulling me towards fulfillment, right? Like if we're trying to maximize us being as happy as we possibly can in life, like what is that thing that we need to be pulling towards? So I would say, yeah, love, connection, contribution, growth for sure. Then all the other things I think kind of like fall in place. Like I still want to be significant. Like I still want to be the greatest husband. I want to be the greatest son. I want to be the greatest father to my kids. I want to be the greatest boss. Like that drive will never leave. I think the ego of needing to show it off maybe is kind of the thing that I think suppressing. Variety, I think will always be there. I think like the balancing act between certainty and variety is interesting because like I certainty is like this consistency. Like I do want to consistently work out. I do want to consistently take care of my body. I do want to consistently like grow and do all these things. But I also like I personally need variety. Like I'm a creative brain, and I think like just doing something that like why I can never do a 9 to 5 with the same job, same task every day. Like this is why I love business is like I get to do a little bit of everything all the time. And sometimes it's stressful as fuck because I'm like I wasn't planning to have all this crap happen this week, but like, that's part of it. I mean, I think like there's a desire for me that's always going to make that. So it's interesting that I like, as I look at it, it's like certainty and like the need for safety and stability is actually the bottom, right? And of all those things. All right, guys. Well, I know that might have felt like a little random out of all things that I talk about sometimes. Like I generally try to tie it into health and fitness as much as possible. But I thought it was like an interesting kind of framing for me to think about was like, with Tony Robbins talking about that and like how can other people, improve their life and like how they can make the changes. And I think like A, knowing what the human needs are, and then B, reflecting back of like, okay, like even like a drill that he actually has, I didn't go over it, but he's like, ask 4 questions, right? He's like, what do I do when I'm stressed or overwhelmed? Do I eat, withdraw, overwork, scroll, control everything, right? And number 2 is like, what do I do when I feel bored or unfulfilled? Do I create chaos? Do I seek novelty? Do I chase attention? Do I start something new? Third question is like, what hurts me the most when it's taken away? Stability, freedom, recognition, relationships, progress, and what consistently has derailed me from my goals in my past? And then connect it, right? Then connect it to those needs and like those behaviors that are being made from it. Because like if the goal is for us, in life to make progress, making progress comes from creating new habits, and creating new habits comes from changing behaviors. And like life is all about patterns. It's all about these things that we're doing. And those behaviors are patterns, right? So when you can learn pattern recognition of like, why is this happening to me? If you can take the time to reflect back on it and why you're making that decision unconsciously, then over time you can consciously make a decision to change, right? And I think a lot of times so many of us are just operating in an autopilot, right? Like we're just going about life and we're not really sure why I'm so stressed, right? Like Tony Robbins, once again, he says this, he goes, why people are so stressed? They're trying to manage, right? They're not trying to create. And I think it's like we are creators of our own life, right? And like I think about this, this is social media, right? Like since like Elliot's been helping with some social media stuff. It's been cool to even see my mindset change, even just like how I'm running social media. Now that I'm like we're posting more and I'm like creating more, when I'm in a position of creating and producing, I'm not consuming, right? And I think when we're consuming and we're managing our lifestyle and our circumstances, it just naturally is going to lead to stress, right? So hopefully you guys got some good little nuggets as always, and I will see everybody next week. Take care. Have a good day.